Hey everybody, I wanted to make a quick video regarding going from a C5 to a C6, and if that's something that you should consider, or if you want to do, considering how similar they are. So I'm going to go over some of the option or the features that the C6 has that the C5 doesn't. Trying to help anyone make up their mind. I for a long time wasn't sure if I was going to. In fact, I told myself I wouldn't because they're so similar. The frames are very similar. The suspension is almost identical. I mean, going from an LS1 to an LS2 or 3, they're very similar engines. They're very similar cars. In fact, it's widely regarded that the C6 is merely an evolution of the C5, whereas the C5 was a revolution from the C4. It's more of a much more refined C5, if that's a good way to put it. So we'll talk about my C5 for a second. My C5 is a 1998. I bought it 4 years ago, had 150,000 miles on it then. It has almost 185, I think, now. Mine is as base model as it gets. It has two options ordered from the factory. That would be the clear Targa top, which I love. That's like the number one option to get, in my opinion. It helps the interior feel so much more roomy. It really lightens up the mood in the car. Anyways, and plush floor mats. You can see the trunk one here, and then the footwells have it too. Other than that, it's no options. They didn't even get the dual zone climate control. It has the wonky, man, it is dark in here. I need some lighting. It has the wonky like Malibu climate control, which is fine. I'd prefer that, more reliable. I don't have to worry about electronics and LCD or the lights going out and all that fun stuff. My C5 is an automatic. I would have liked to have gotten a manual. At the time, this was just the cheapest C5 I could find, and I had a C4 that was in my garage, and this was like the only way I could make that step, being that it was so affordable. So I took that leap, and I've loved my car. It's been super reliable. I drive it very hard. It's not stock. The motor is basically stock. It has an exhaust, an intake manifold, coilovers, sway bars. It's a wide body, racing seats. Other than that, it's just a fun car. So I've been contemplating upgrading for a couple of years. Like, seriously, I've had my car for sale a handful of times, like for a day or two, like contemplating this and how I'm going to make that work. And I decided that if I get a C6, it's going to be the most premium C6 I can find. I don't want to go from the most bare bones bottom tier C5 to the most bare bones bottom tier C6. That makes no sense to me. I might as well just keep the C5 because they're essentially the same car. So there's no way I was going to buy an automatic. No way I would pick an 05. And that's nothing to say that those are bad cars by any means, but it's just so similar to what I already have. It wouldn't be worth the extra money to make that jump. I'd just be in a slightly nicer C5. So I kind of set my sights on a Z06. And I was kind of keeping my eyes on the market, not really being able to move on anything for a long time. And kind of when I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel and where I could afford one, I started to really consider other options after hearing and reading so much about the valve dropping and how even if you get them fixed through a reputable shop or having whole new heads altogether, you still run the chance of dropping a valve, and people still do it, and it's not a 100% guarantee kind of thing. And that really, you're spending that kind of money. I didn't want to have to worry about totaling a car over a valve, like over a $15,000 engine. That's nuts to me. So I kind of was really hesitating on the Z06, and then once I realized that the Z06 doesn't have the Targa top, now that sealed the deal. So the next step below that was a Grand Sport. They're typically around the same price. You get the Z06 wide body, you get the Z06 suspension, the Z06 braking or brake system, and their Grand Sport was made from 2010 to 2013. The Z06 is a 2003 to 2013. So if you buy a Grand Sport, a lot of times they're newer, which was kind of a plus, even though mine is actually higher miles. So I did ended up getting a Grand Sport, and here's why. I wanted the real reliability of the LS3. I wanted the removable top, and I wanted everything else. And I know it's not hard to make that extra 70 horsepower with an LS3. They're fantastic engines. So down the road, that will happen. I did get a manual. I kind of spec'd it all out. And I just learned, as I was kind of looking into Grand Sports more, that if you get a coupe with a manual transmission, GM put hand-built LS3s in them with a dry sump oiling system. So that's even one more step closer to a Z06 while maintaining the reliability of the LS3. So let's take a closer look at the C5 if those who aren't familiar with it. So this is the C5 interior. It is super 90s. The C5 especially gets so much like crap for their interior. So very wide panel grouts. It's all like playground equipment plastic. This is aftermarket stereo, obviously. I didn't even bring the C5 keys to show you the dash. The door panels, like the leather comes out. All these clips fall out super easy. It does not feel nice in here, if that makes sense. It feels super 90s. I feel like I'm almost in a Dodge Neon. The seats, these are aftermarket seats, so these seats are amazing. The stock C5 seats are awful. They provide little to no support at all. You will slide around like crazy. The leather material is whack. It wrinkles and it tears. My C5 when I bought it actually had super nice seats. They were the base like non-sport seats, but they were in such good shape. Not a single tear or wrinkle in the leather at all. They must have been brand new when I bought the car, but they still didn't hold you in at all, so I got rid of them. That was like a month ago that I did that. So let's take a look at my C6. Okay. Okay, well, here's a better look at my C5. Like I said, wide body coilovers, Z06 wheels. Anyways, the C6 is obviously a much newer, more visually appealing car in my opinion, especially with a wide body. And this is a Centennial edition. So this color was only offered with the Centennial package. It's called Carbon Flash Metallic. Okay, so that's the biggest, or the first thing I'll mention about one reason to get a C6 over a C5 is the appeal, the visual appeal, right? It's a much better looking car, in my opinion. My C5, I think, looks fantastic because it's so low, it's wide, it's got some custom touches to it. I wouldn't pick a base C5 stock over a Grand Sport or a wide body C6 ever. But I love how this car sits, if that makes any sense at all. Let's take a look at the back of the cars. I'm sure most of you are familiar with how these cars look. Let's see I've always felt like the C5 rear end left a little too plain. An exhaust really helps. That's a Corsa Sport Tiger Shark edition. It sounds amazing. So the second thing outside of the visuals is how much nicer it is in here. Granted, it is still not great, but man, it is worlds above that car. I feel like how I've explained the difference. This car is if an S-Class Mercedes had a baby with that car, this is what you get. So the fit and finish in here is so much better. I feel like GM put a little bit more care and attention to the interior of the C6, and it shows. Being that this is a Centennial edition, it has some custom touches, or not custom I should say, but upgraded. So like this is all leather, where the base C6 is plastic, I believe, and the red stitching around has like the steering wheel is suede with red stitching. It's kind of faded. It just has suede accents and suede inserted seats. Now this being a 2012 has the updated seats, so they have some shoulder bolstering. These actually feel pretty good. I'm still going to put my Corvettes in it just because I just bought them, but these seats are pretty good for what you'd expect out of a stock C5 or out of a stock Vet. So the interior being so much nicer, that's a huge plus in my opinion. The next big thing to think about is the overall refinement of the car. So you have differences in the rear end, like the differential itself. Here, we'll switch it back. Oh, a lot of light. Oh, a lot of light. Okay, so The differential, for example, is much stronger in the C6. The housing is different. The internals are the same, but the housing is different, more sturdy. You have an LS3 engine now, so you go from 345 or 350 horsepower to 430, which is a significant jump. They're much more reliable. You can modify them with more, how do you say this, more bang for your buck, so to speak, which I'll find out firsthand on my own eventually. And the big thing for me, that was a big deciding factor for me, is I wanted a manual. I've never had a manual car before. It's something I've always wanted to learn how to do. So I thought, if I'm going to get another vet, it's going to be manual, hands down. I won't settle for an auto this time. So this one has the 6-speed. It has a TR. That's a crappy view. It's got the TR 6060. I'm still learning, but it's been fun so far. Other than that, I guess the other thing is, the C6. The C6 has a lot more like options, like for cars, right? So the C5, you're stuck with either a base with a Z51 package maybe, or a convertible, or a Z06, and that was pretty much it. And the differences between all three were not super significant. The Z06 had the fixed roof coupe, which was cool, but you had the same engine essentially with a different heads, different cam. The LS6, slightly stiffer suspension, but the car was pretty much the same. With the C6, you have a lot more options for if you're looking for something more specific, like the Grand Sport, for example. Like there's no in between step as little, that doesn't compromise so much on the C5, if that makes sense. So like this is kind of everything I wanted. What else? So that's my takeaway from it. I've loved my C6 so far. I've had it less than a week. I've had it since what's this, day 5 now. But that's the spec I wanted. I wanted a manual. It had to be manual. Had to be a Grand Sport, and had to be a coupe. I would not, and that's just my preference. I don't like convertibles very much. At least the rag tops. I don't think they look very good. But so far, I really enjoyed it. The car, and see, this is where it's like hard to make a accurate comparison because my C5 is not stock. This car rides much smoother. It feels more like an Escalade because that's sitting on coilovers, which I'm going to switch over. And that's another thing to consider is the C6 has more technology. So you kind of run into more issues with some things. For example, this has magnetic ride control, which doesn't work. The shocks are all like puking fluid. So real quick, the reason you can just buy new magnetic ride control shocks. And that was my first option. And I had no idea how expensive they were for I think it's an F45 package in the C5, which is similar, but it's not the same. It attempts to do the same thing. Those shocks were a little bit more expensive than the non-F45 shocks. So you're looking at like $180 or $300 for a set of shocks on a C5 for the normal. And then for the F45 package shocks, you're like $600 or $700. So getting into this car, I thought, well, that's not going to be that big of a deal. And then I found out they're like $400 a shock. No way. So, and I obviously have coilovers already, and they'll swap directly over. Like I said, the suspensions are almost identical. So it'll swap right over. They'll work just great. I just had to buy those simulator plugs. The car goes into limp mode when you unplug them, and it won't let you go over 80 miles an hour. So I had to buy some simulator plugs, which I bought from Jegs for like $180, which will trick the computer into thinking that they're there, and then I can put whatever I want in the car, and it won't throw a fit. So the coilovers are going to get swapped over. The seats will get swapped over. It'll feel more of like a dramatic canyon carver like I'm used to. But other than that, I mean, it's got an oil cooler from the factory. It's got a steering cooler from the factory. Like, I think the difference is bigger for me because I went from a 98, like bare bones chassis of a C5 to a premium decked out C6. So like, rather than, just a nicer interior, I have a lot of things that my C5 didn't have that I'm glad I have in this car. And also, the C6 still has panel gaps on the inside. It is not a perfect interior. It is nicer than the C5, that's without a doubt. But this is not an S-Class. I added that in there, but yeah, I'll show you. So here's some of the You still have this giant panel gap that's in the C5, very evident here. It's on both sides, and you still get plastic, lots and lots of plastic. But especially in my car, in the Centennial Edition, the places that you touch all the time, like the steering wheel and the door handle, like they feel good. And this is like, I mean, mine's kind of beat up, but this housing is all like brushed metal, and it feels awesome. And the cup holders, they're probably still not great, but man, it's better than the C5. I'll have to show you the C5 for those who aren't familiar. Let's do that really quick. So C6 has electronic doors, if some of you didn't know that. This can be annoying if the car is dead or your key fob is dead to get out. If you're in the car, there is an emergency release at the floor. I was reading an article where an older guy had actually died in his C6 because he didn't know where the manual release was, or it wasn't working properly or whatever, and he was stuck in the hot Texas sun for 4 hours inside of his vet. And that's awful. So don't let that happen to you. There's the emergency release. Make sure it works. Let's make sure it works. Yep, it works. Okay. And there are ways to get into the car from the outside if it dies, if your key fob is dead. So I'll show you. The key is right here. Now, this looks like a cool key, right? That's because it is. It's got a lot of cool features. I'll set it down right here. So here's the key, right? And that has a cool logo on the back. And this serves a purpose too. But if you push this button here, this release button, you have an actual key. And this actual key, oh gosh, sorry, goes into a little tiny, I need to tighten that back up. There's a slot right here. And it opens the trunk. Now I do it, but I'd have to remove my rear view camera. And then from the trunk, right about here in the interior is a pull release to open the driver door. There's not one for the passenger, but there's a fuel door and a driver door unlock. So now let me show you what this Corvette logo and ring do, because it also serves a purpose outside of looking cool. While I get my key back in here. Okay. So, if you're ever in your C6, if you have one, and your key fob dies, your car's not going to even recognize the key fobs in the car, and you will not be able to start it. They're all push starts. There's nowhere to put the key, except for this nice little nifty. Oh, good. Let's see if I can turn the light on. Aha! Slot right here. Now, if I understand this correctly, this has an ohm resistor or a chip of some kind, some fancy 007 thing, and you can put your key fob in here, and once it's in, you can push start your car. So if your fob dies, and you need to get out of there, that's how you can do that. So if you're going from like an 0406 Carbonate or Commemorative Edition, or one of those kinds of cars in a C5, I wouldn't even entertain the idea of going to like an 05 or an 06 or an 07 manual car, unless you just love the body that much. To me personally, that wouldn't make much sense. But if you're in my situation or something similar, this has been a good jump. And if you don't want to spend 25, 30 grand on a Grand Sport or Z06, the base models from 2008 through 2013 have the LS3 and the TR6060 as well. And you can switch over the body panels if you want. There's so many options. So you can really pick the car out for you that fits what you like and what you want. But that's my video. Why don't you post comments in the video and let me know what you think about both cars, if that's something that's worth it to you. Like I said, for so long, I thought I'd never go to a C6 because I thought, God, they're like essentially the same car. Why would I switch over? But let me know like at what point you thought, oh yeah, that makes sense to jump over, or you know what, it's not going to work for me. Yeah, comment below, and thanks for watching.